And thanks for joining us for our final team preview of 2025. Team 9 of 9. It is the Ottawa REDBLACKS, and joining us from Brazil is Santino Filoso. He is a contributor at 3downnation.com. We love having you here to talk REDBLACKS before the season. Thanks for doing this.
Thank you guys very much for the invite. I appreciate it.
Now, the Ottawa REDBLACKS went 9-8-1 in 2024, but it was a return to the playoffs, which after seasons of struggle and actually great home field performance coming out of last year, after years of poor home field performance and missing the playoffs, had to be considered a success even though they lost in the East Semi to Toronto.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think last year was a big building year. As you said, it checked off a couple of boxes. I mean, anyone in our nation everyone really has been complaining about how they just seem to not be able to play well at home. So the home record overall, like in the franchise history, has not been too good. So, I mean, it was a very nice change of pace last year to see them set a franchise record going 7-1-1 at home. And then, getting back to the playoffs was obviously essential because it had been quite a few years. I think the last time before that was 2018. So definitely building blocks, but I think, and rightly so, I think it's raised expectations for this season because, I mean, they at least need to get back to the playoffs again. But I would say that I don't really think you can consider 2025 a success unless you win a playoff game at this point. I think you need to build off last season.
No, it does look like that East Division is going to be another. Well, every team, everybody's so tight. The parity in the league it's crazy right now. But Dru Brown, he comes into his second season as a starting quarterback. Last year, almost 4,000 yards, 18 touchdowns against 10 interceptions. What's the team looking like for that next step in his growth as a starting quarterback?
Well, I think one thing that's really going to help him is it's going to be his second year in Tommy Candell's system. So I think that continuity will definitely help and should be able again to kind of, we're going to go back to build off of last year's success. I think it helps, of course, the receiving core was already very strong. And now they already had Kalil Pimpleton, who was recently extended. You already had Justin Hardy, Braylon Addison, and now, when you add a Eugene Lewis to that mix, that's a pretty good receiving core right there. Last season, Ottawa was second in the league in passing, but their offense was held back by a couple of things. First, they were dead last in rushing. So the rushing attack was pretty much non-existent. I don't know if you guys remember, but even in the playoff game, they started Braylon Addison at running back. So anytime you're forced to use a receiver as your primary running back, you're probably going to have not ideal, let's say. So, I mean, that wasn't great, but, getting William Stanback should help that a lot. I mean, obviously he is a 30-year-old running back and he's coming off a season where he had career highs in touches, both in terms of carries he was given and passes that he caught. But, he also turned that into career highs in rushing and receiving totals. So I think they're going to be very careful with how they use him in the preseason. I think the fact that they were able to add a Canadian running back that they signed from the Argos, Daniel, let me just check his name here so I say it right because I don't want to get it wrong. But Adababoya, there we go. Daniel Adababoya. I think he's going to be make for a nice 1-2 punch because, again, he's a very good running back in his own right. And so I think that mix of him and Stanback should hopefully bring a little bit more balance to the offense and solve some of the red zone issues. Because, again, as productive as Ottawa was last year, they were, again, dead last in terms of red zone production. So if the team wants to progress and take that next step, those are things that have to change.
Yeah, so let's talk about some of the changes on the defense. So we have coming in, we have Tunde Adeleke, you got Robert Priester, we got Amari Henderson coming from the Riders here. What do you think is going to shape up on the D side of the ball?
Well, the defensive side of the ball, I think they managed to bring back the entire starting defensive line, which was good because that was, I would say, arguably the strength of the team last year. And again, they have a number of veteran linebackers. Obviously, Darius Pickett is the star of that group. He's coming off the torn Achilles, but by all accounts, he's been healthy. And, he's been participating fully in training camp. I don't think he's playing tomorrow in the preseason game. But I mean, still think it bodes well that he's out there every day. He's doing all the drills. So I think you're just kind of being careful with him. But if he's at 100% to start the year, that's huge. Jovan Santos Knox in the middle is, an excellent middle linebacker, veteran. And then I guess the training camp battle in the linebacking core would be on the weak side, because there you have Frankie Griffin and Davion Taylor. So both of those guys are experienced Americans, and it'll be interesting to see who kind of emerges with that job. But yeah, as you kind of alluded to, the secondary was the team's Achilles heel. I think they gave up a league high, 31 explosive plays of more than 30-yard gains. And I mean, in the playoff game, that's how Toronto hung 58 on them. They just got torched. Yeah. It was just guys running loose. So, I mean, that was definitely not a good thing. And I think, you saw Damon Webb left, Money Hunter, Brendan Danridge, Ty Cranston, who's Canadian, retired. And so, yeah, as you alluded to, they brought in a bunch of new names. So Amari Henderson is there. They have Robert Priester from the Argos, who ended up having a pick six in the Grey Cup. So it'll be interesting to see kind of how that all shakes out. They also signed an American named Craig James, who has some NFL experience, although he's new to the CFL. So it'll be interesting. I think that's the position that has the most up for grabs. I would argue that you probably have 4 of the 5 roles up for grabs. I think the way Ottawa does their ratio, it'll be a Canadian at safety. So it's very likely Alonzo would die, especially because unfortunately Justin Howell is injured again. So he's not really going to get to push him for that starting role through camp. So yeah, I think you have 4 of the 5 spots that'll be up for grabs. So I think it'll really come down to who's being the most consistent day in and day out at practice during the training camp, and obviously who actually produces in the preseason when the lights are on. So.
Yeah, and then on defense, we also have a new defensive coordinator as they moved on from Baron Miles. It's now Will Fields, who was a co-defensive coordinator with Kevin Iben in Toronto last year. So what do you think is going to differ from Baron Miles' playbook, I guess, to Will Fields?
Well, yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how that translates. I mean, he's obviously going to have some players that are familiar with his schemes and with his system. Darius Pickett has already played for him. As I mentioned, Robert Priester was in his system. And, if you look at the Argos defense the past couple of years, they're a very opportunistic defense. They're very good at generating turnovers. And yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that translates to the cast of characters he has available at his disposal in Ottawa, because it's a number of veterans. Obviously, as we had talked about, the secondary is in a state of flux because we don't really know who's going to wind up starting games. But I mean, I think that defensive line has proven that they can consistently get pressure. And I mean, if the linebacking core is healthy and they're ready to go, I think, it could be I think the defense could be very strong.
Yeah. And then we also have another coordinator change. We have Rick Campbell coming back as a special teams coordinator. So, didn't work out as a head coach, I guess, in the end in BC, but now coming home to Ottawa. So what do you think that bodes for the team?
Yeah, I was kind of surprised to see him leave BC. I guess kind of with the way last year ended, somebody had to fall on that sword.
Yeah.
But I mean, I'll be totally honest with you. I don't know about you guys, but I was pretty surprised when Ottawa brought him in. Not because I don't think it was a good addition. I think it was an excellent addition. I mean, he's obviously a very experienced coach. He's been to Grey Cups, won Grey Cups. But I was a little bit surprised because I kind of felt like Bob Dice might think, I have this guy who, if we start off slow, I got someone breathing down my neck.
Yeah.
But from what I've heard, that's not the case whatsoever. In fact, it was Dice who actually kind of, really insisted on bringing him in and wanting him there because they're good friends and they trust each other. And I think that's awesome. I think it also speaks to the level that Bob has, the level of confidence that Bob Dice has in himself and, his abilities. And I think that's a great thing for Ottawa. I think that special teams, when Bob Dice was just Ottawa special teams coordinator, Ottawa special teams were very, very good. I mean, obviously it helped when Devontae Dedmon was healthy kind of before he went to the NFL because he's kind of struggled a little bit in recent years being able to stay on the field. But when Bob Dice was doing that full time, Ottawa special teams were very, very good. And I think now having someone like Rick Campbell, because I think, obviously we've had a special coordinator in the past couple of years, but, Dice was kind of not able to focus on that as much. So I think having someone like Rick Campbell that can, dedicate himself to that exclusively should be a huge benefit for the Red Blacks.
I think last year's success, I don't think there was anybody I felt better for than Bob Dice, seeing him have that success and get some wins under his belt. And it's a fine line, though. You don't want to hire your eventual replacement, but you also want to surround yourself with the best people. That's quite the balance to strike.
Yeah, and I mean, I think the interesting thing for Rick Campbell is if he comes in right now and, Ottawa has a great season and the special teams are strong, I think he's like, number one candidate for at the end of 2025. Like there's going to be a job opening somewhere. That's just the nature of the business.
Yeah.
And, if things go well in Ottawa, how could he not be at the top of, the list for those people who are going to be calling to add someone?
Now, I think there are a lot of players on this team that are quite underrated, and I actually do think the defensive line as a whole is. A couple of years ago, Lorenzo Malden, the fourth, he got his flowers. He got celebrated, but there are other guys on that D-line that were just consistent performers, and I don't think they really got the accolades, I should say. So who else on the Red Blacks, some underrated players on that roster that you think people are going to get to know very soon?
So, yeah, I mean, when you're talking about the defensive line, I mean, Mike Wakefield in the middle has just been phenomenal. And him and Cleon Lang, I mean, Cleon Lang's getting up there in age. I mean, he's not actually old, but I'm going to say athlete old, so he's mid-30s. But I mean, like, he is still producing at a great level, and he's still awesome at, just kind of eating blocks and freeing up other guys and still, contributing once in a while, helping to collapse the pocket from the middle. So I think him and Wakefield make a great tandem in the middle. And then, opposite Lorenzo Malden, you have Bryce Carter, who last year I think tied the league lead in sacks with 11.5. I believe I have to double check. I'm not sure. But I mean, he had a very, very strong season. But one thing that's really interesting about Ottawa's defensive line is they have a lot of depth. So, for example, one guy who's going into his third year, who's a Canadian, is Aiden John. And he's someone who, as a rookie, he kind of contributed on special teams. Last year, he was rotated in, and he had quite a strong season. So I'm very interested to see what he's going to do in his third year, if he can continue to take another step, because he's the kind of guy that he's got a high motor. Like, he doesn't give up on plays. He's often the guy chasing plays down from behind and kind of putting on that pressure when the quarterback might think there's not any pressure because they've moved enough. So, yeah, I mean, I think that's a very interesting name as kind of someone who's under the radar. Lucas Cormier as well, who is a linebacker. Ottawa drafted him in the second round a couple of years ago, but he's struggled with injuries. But he's someone the team is very high on. He's kind of like an Antoine Pruneau type. Like, he can play safety, he can play linebacker. He's going to contribute a lot on special teams. So it's going to be interesting to see if he can stay healthy this year, where they end up being able to kind of work him in and, see if he's just going to be part of certain rotation packages. At a certain point, is he going to be able to work himself into a starting role? So, yeah, that's someone I'll definitely be keeping an eye on as well.
I want to ask about the quarterback room. Jeremiah Masoli, he got back onto the field last year, if I remember correctly, engineered that win against Calgary in Calgary. And then it seemed like after that moment, the Stampeders just completely fell off. I don't know if it was that loss, but they definitely did. So, but a lot of the same faces. In comes Matt Schiltz, who was in said Calgary's room last year. A familiar face. We've seen him coming off the bench in Hamilton and Montreal for years. It's clearly Dru Brown's team, but Crum had success. Tyree Adams coming off an injury. Schiltz can come off the bench too. They do have some CFL experience there behind center, which we know is very important in today's CFL.
Yeah, like I can't even remember the last time a CFL team got through a full season just using one quarterback, right? Yeah. It's basically unheard of. So, at some point your backup is getting in, you're just kind of hoping it's for a game or two and not much more than that. But yeah, as you mentioned, they do have a lot of depth. Like, Schiltz is kind of that typical career journeyman backup. He's proven he can get it done in spot duty and stuff like that. And as you alluded to, there's Dustin Crum. He kind of burst onto the scene as a rookie in, I think, 2023. Ottawa had a lot of injuries at the quarterback position, and Crum wound up starting 14 games, which is actually quite significant. That's a lot of experience. Last season, he didn't start any games, but, he was the quarterback that handled all the quarterback sneaks, and there were certain trick play packages and stuff like that. Crum is a huge mobile threat. Like, he can move the pocket, he can run over guys. He's not scared to put his shoulder down and run through someone. Yeah, he's tough. Like, he's taken some hits that sometimes when you watch him play, like, I don't think he's getting up, but he bounced right back up. Unfortunately, he hasn't quite taken that next step in terms of his development as a passer. Like, he's still isn't always the most accurate, and sometimes, is a little bit slow with his reads, but he also still is quite young. So it'll be interesting to see, what he looks like in this preseason, kind of has he continued his development over the offseason? Because if he's, kind of improved in the passing game and he can put that with his mobility, that could be a very interesting option for Ottawa. And then finally, at the bottom of the depth chart right now, you have Tyree Adams. And I don't know if you guys have ever seen him. He's kind of like a slender looking guy, but he has a cannon of an arm, and he is also very mobile. Last year he was buried on the depth chart, so he didn't really play at all. But the year before, he started one game, and it was a win against the Elks. But then he ended up tearing his knee, so then he didn't play anymore in 2023. So he's someone else who's kind of very intriguing because he has a lot of potential. I'm very curious because I think that the backup quarterback spot in Ottawa is a wide open competition. I know that, of course, they have Schultz and there's Crum and Adams, but I don't think anybody is, kind of in the lead. I think it's going to really come down to who earns it and who makes the most of the opportunities. And I really do think it's going to be merit-based.
Around a lot of training camps, we've seen some injuries. The Red Blacks have not been immune to that. Obviously, Nick Mardner, a pretty serious injury, I believe. So can you go over that a little bit? And then who are some other Canadians that might be able to step up in that position in his when he's not there?
Yeah, perfect. So, this year Ottawa's first round pick was Keelan White. So I think he went third overall. So I think he's going to get a long look. I believe he's starting the preseason game tomorrow, and kind of since Nick Mardner went down, he's been getting most of the reps with the starting team. I think the nice thing for the Red Blacks is because the receiving core is already so stacked. Obviously they start a Canadian there because they need to for racial purposes, and kind of anything they get from that position in terms of production is kind of gravy, because I don't think they're going to be counting on him to do any of the heavy lifting, but you definitely want someone who's capable, someone who's a good blocker, someone who can still get open and be an option. I do think Keelan White is going to have a look. There's also Ethan Jordan, who was selected 51st overall, and Jordan, he ran a very fast 40 time at the combine. I think he was like a 4.4, which is quite good. And he was very productive in U Sports. I think he had 27 touchdowns. So he's someone else who, could be a very interesting option as well. And then the Red Blacks also have Marco Dubois, who I think is a 6th or 7th year player. And they use him more as a fullback. He's mainly special teams, but once in a while they'll throw him passes. And he's technically a receiver, even though they kind of use him as a fullback or a tight end, kind of a hybrid most of the time. But I don't think that they're going to look at him as someone to be that receiver, because I think they really do value his contributions on special teams. But he's someone who's more than capable of delivering, when he gets looks. So it'll be interesting to see. But I do think right now the plan is for Keelan White to kind of get the first shot at filling those shoes, and then they'll kind of go from there.
Well, you said special teams, and I got to pivot here to Kalil Pimpleton, who recently got extended by the team, one of the best names in the CFL, and he burst onto the scene last summer. Like, I was in Edmonton for that game when he has 153 yards, a 70-yard touchdown. In July, the game against Calgary when Mazzoli won, he had a punt return touchdown. He had 167 yards against Hamilton. So in 8 games, 715 yards. That doesn't even include what he was doing on special teams too. He's 26 years old. Like, if this guy can stay on the field and stay healthy, he's Dedmon, obviously, if he's healthy and on the field, there are some real threats to score. It doesn't matter if they're on the 1 yard line of the opposite side of the field. Like, these are some exciting guys.
Yeah, I think General Manager Sean Burke should be commended because, there's depth everywhere. I do believe that Devontae Dedmon was re-signed this offseason with the thought that he would come back and kind of be that primary punt returner or kick returner. Obviously, it's nice to have Pimpleton back there as well, and you can do trick plays and kind of split it up. But I do think they're kind of leaning right now towards using Pimpleton more on offense and kind of leaving more of the return duties to Dedmon. But of course, as you've alluded to, he's had injuries staying healthy, so it's very nice to have someone like Pimpleton that you can flimp back there, if and when need be.
I look at some of the losses of the team, but they've. And again, Sean Burke, the job he's done at filling those holes. Like Dominic Rhymes, he's back in Calgary playing with his buddy VA, but in comes Gino Lewis. Jalen Acklin is out of that receiving core, but still tons of depth in the receiving core and depth all over the field. But when I look at this roster, they feel like a very physical team, and the players that Toronto has lost, I feel like Ottawa could become the bullies of the East. They've been a really good job of building the trenches, and it feels, and maybe you've been hurt before as an Ottawa fan, you don't want to get your hopes up, but it feels to me like they're poised for a darn good season here.
Yeah, I mean, on paper, like as you said, you look through that roster and they seem pretty complete on offense, on defense, on special teams. Of course, they have to put it all together. You were talking about kind of even boosting areas like in the trenches that were a strength. Like they went out and they signed Peter Godber, who's probably going to be the starting center. And like that offensive line was already very good. And, they upgraded the center position now. So, yeah, they definitely should be able to play bully ball. But as you had mentioned earlier, they'll need to improve against the East, because last year, Ottawa was only 3-8 against the East, but they were 6-3-1 against the West. And historically, that's not really common for Eastern teams to do well against Western teams. But yeah, Ottawa was very good against the West last year, but they were not good against the East at all. So, if they want to take that next step, and hopefully host a home playoff game and kind of build off that, they're definitely going to need to improve against the East. And as you said, Toronto's lost a lot of pieces, but I mean, you should never count out the defending champs. And I mean, I think Dinwiddie's a great coach. And, Chad Kelly under center or Nick Arbuckle, they're going to be, get good play from the quarterback position. Montreal, very strong roster as well. It'd be interesting to see how Alexander does at quarterback, because I do kind of feel like they rolled the dice there a little bit. But I mean, if they can limit his growing pains, like they're going to be good. Bo Levi Mitchell last year at times when he wasn't turning the ball over looked absolutely electric. And that's a fan base that's just like starving for a winner. So there's going to be a lot of pressure on the Ticats too. So I think the East is going to be very competitive. But yeah, I mean, on paper, which doesn't really count for anything, the Red Blacks look like they can compete.
Yeah, Edmonton and Elks fans were crowning themselves the Grey Cup champs in February, but that's exactly on paper stuff. Training camp's been at Queen's University this year.
Yeah.
That's a change of scenery for the team.
Yeah, typically it's always in Ottawa. I mean, the Renegades have held training camp outside of Ottawa in different places, and the Rough Riders used to as well. But for the Red Blacks, this was the first. They have done training camp at Carleton University. Obviously, it's still in town, but they've done that before. But no, they've never done it in Kingston. And I think it's kind of interesting, I guess they'll kind of assess and see how that worked out and, how it was from a player's point. I mean, Kingston's very close to Ottawa. It's 2-hour drive, realistically an hour and a half. There's a lot of traffic. So, I mean, you're close. And they have lots of great facilities. You're there with the Queens Golden Gales. They have very state-of-the-art stuff. So, I mean, I think it's an interesting thing. And maybe there is something to the fact that kind of getting away in a true training camp scenario, kind of staying in the dorms. Let's see how that goes in terms of team building and bonding and stuff like that. And, if this turns out to be a very good year or something, maybe it's something that we see become more often, especially because, I think in the next couple of years, they're going to start doing Lansdowne 2.0 and kind of redoing the north side stands and stuff like that. So they're going to need a place to do training camp. So potentially Kingston is an option if they decide to go out of town. I mean, Carleton University is always there, but, it would be nice for them to know they have something else in their back pocket should they need it.
Now, I will finally ask you about, we kind of talked about Montreal and Toronto. We don't have to get too much into them right now, but you said Ottawa needs to be better against the East, and I like what they do. They're kind of recruiting their fans. It looks like that Thanksgiving game in Montreal, they're putting together this bus trip, make it into a Thanksgiving classic, drown out the horns.
I don't know if you saw, actually, they just announced today that Montreal actually announced the Alouettes that they banned the air horns. So
I did not see this.
Yeah,
Breaking
so I think
news.
Three Down Nation. Yeah, I think Three Down Nation reported that maybe like an hour ago. But yeah, so pretty breaking news. I'm very curious to see how their fans react to that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think this season there won't be any air horns.
Wow,
One
so
less
that
thing for everyone to bitch about.
that Our Nation invasion might make a big difference in October then.
Interesting that you mentioned the team kind of organizing that, because I think, as far as I remember, like, the team hasn't really made a concerted effort to do that in the past. Like, there's been a lot of like fans that will organize themselves, and like the Southsiders in Ottawa, which is like a fan group, they will kind of always have some kind of presence at the away games, especially in the East. And there's been different like fan buses and stuff like that. But this is the first time I can remember that the team has a pretty good deal. I think it's about $100 for a ticket and your bus trip there to go to Montreal. So they're putting together some buses. They also offered the option for people, obviously it's a little bit more expensive, but to fly to Hamilton or to fly to a few of the games out west. And I mean, you know, you're probably not going to have a ton of takers on that, but it's interesting that the team's actually offering that now as a possibility. Because as you said, like, I think, you know, the more away fans you can get kind of supporting you when you're in those hostile environments, the better, right? So, I think that's a really cool thing, and it's nice to see that from the team. And I hope they keep that going in future years and even kind of build that up, as you had said.
And then obviously, finally, I don't want to. My preseason predictions are usually out to lunch, but does this season kind of feel like, as a building block from last year? Earlier, you said a playoff win is probably the focus, and you know, Sean Burke has now had a few years under his belt to put the roster together. Is this like this is a home playoff game? Obviously, you want to get to the dance, but the home playoff game probably is be a huge focus of the Red Blacks this year.
Yeah, I agree completely. I mean, I think they've come out and said that before. So Adrian Secura, who's the OSEG president, before him it was Mark Gowdy, and that was something they stated multiple times publicly, that OSEG, you know, they wanted every year to have a home playoff game. Obviously, that has not happened in recent years, not since 2018. But I definitely think that should be something that should be, that challenge, let's say, should be embraced this year by the organization, because, you know, they went 7-1 last year at home. So they should, even if they can't get quite to that level, you want to keep playing well at home, because, you know, you obviously want to keep your season ticket holders happy and, you know, your casual fans and stuff like that, but also because it's actually good for the team to win. But yeah, I mean, a home playoff game is a big thing. And have you guys been to games before at KD Place?
I've only been, I was at the Grey Cup in 2017.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Our nation can get quite rowdy. Yeah, they can get rowdy. That was a good game. I was also there in the snow. But yeah, like, Ottawa fans are rowdy and they're loud, especially when the team is good. And,
I love that they have a rivalry inside their own stadium with each other.
Exactly.
Like, that's my favorite.
Yeah, they do. Yeah, they do. The north side and the south side. So, I mean, which is awesome, because, you know, when one side's going loud, the other side wants to be louder and stuff like that. So, yeah, it's a very electric atmosphere in the playoffs there. I think all the time, but especially in the playoffs, you can just kind of sense it. There's something in the air. It's a step up. I'm sure it's the same, you know, in Saskatchewan. So I think if they can manage to get a home game, I would like their odds of winning the home game. So, you know, and then from there, you know, if you're second place, then you would go to the East Final. And, you know, if you end up finishing first and you can win that East Final, then you have a trip to the Grey Cup, and who knows what happens. So I definitely think that for this season to be considered a success, you know, they at minimum have to win a playoff game, but realistically host a home playoff game and win that. I think that's where the bar should be. And I don't think they should shy away from kind of, you know, aiming for that.
I could be wrong, and crazy things go on in Pilsner country at Mosaic Stadium. But to see, I don't know if you know about this, you probably do, the guy that takes off and does the shoe beer. Like,
yeah.
He was like 4 rows in front of me. It's like blizzarding, and he takes his shoe off, pours the beer. I'm like, yeah, that's a special breed of fan, man.
Yeah, well, I mean, you know, once you do that a few times, I think you stop caring. So it's really anymore. But no, he's a great guy. And,
I love that. Yeah. It becomes tradition, and then all of a sudden, you can't say no anymore. I love it.
Yeah, for sure.
Joining the show to talk about the upcoming season for the Ottawa REDBLACKS was Santino Filoso, a contributor at 3downnation.com. Thanks for being here to talk Red and
Thank
Black.
you guys once again. I really appreciate it, and let's have a great CFL season.
Thanks again to Santino Filoso of 3downnation.com for coming on the show and wrapping up our season previews. Team 9 of 9, the Ottawa REDBLACKS. That wraps up our 2025 team previews. Rate, review, and subscribe to the show on any of the major podcast platforms to listen to the past previews and future episodes as we will take you through the 2025 CFL season. For Sheldon Jones, I'm Travis Currah. Talk to you soon on 2 and Out.